It has now been 3 years since I've moved to Japan, and every year I've been noticing many people around me talk about kafunsho around the month of February. I know this translates to hay fever, but why does it seem like so many people are heavily affected by allergies?
Are you allergic to anything?
No, fortunately, but I frequently hear my coworkers talk about their symptoms like runny noses or itchy eyes. It sounds irritating. My cousin has had to take time off of work because of the severity of her symptoms.
Before I became a monk, I was a physical therapist, and kafunsho was something that many of my clients also suffered from, so I've done a lot of research. In Japan, there are 38 million people who are allergic to pollen from sugi, Japanese cedar trees. But allergies in general became prevalent in developed countries in the 20th century. So this isn't just something that happens in Japan. After 1955, the number of patients affected by kafunsho doubled. So there aren't many people in our grandparents' generations who are affected by pollen, but many young people are. The first kafunsho diagnosis was done in 1964 at a hospital in Nikko City by a what do you call an ear, throat and nose doctor?
An otolaryngologist, or ENT for short.
Yes, that an otolaryngologist something. Anyway, so this doctor, Dr. Saito, had many patients coming in with acute conjunctivitis, where the eyes get red. Dr. Saito found it peculiar that there is a flood of so many people with the same symptom around the same time. So this doctor studied the papers from the UK. Within the papers, he read about a rise of hay fever during the summer. And there are many pastures in Europe, so during the months of June and July, the pollen from these pastures fly around all of Europe. There was a sudden increase in the 20th century, like there was in Japan. So Dr. Saito figured this spread of pollen could be the cause. Well, depending on the species of plant, pollen is released during different times of the year. So he looked up which plant was releasing pollen during the time where many patients came in, and he concluded it was cedar in Japan.
Then why does pollen lead to these reactions?
Our human bodies have immune systems that attack bacteria or any sort of virus that come into our bodies, so sneezing or runny noses are immune responses to get rid of any pathogens or germs. Although pollen is benign in that it doesn't lead to any disease, our immune system thinks they are nefarious and overreact. This is what allergies are.
So what's the mechanism behind this overreaction?
Have you heard of antibodies?
Yes, they protect the body?
Correct. So there is a specific type called IgE, which is important in host defense against parasitic infections. When pollen enters our system, within the mucous membranes, there are mast cells that the IgEs come into contact with. So when the IgEs keep triggering the mast cells, they detonate and inflammatory substances within the cells are released. This is what leads to the nerves being stimulated, which makes things feel itchy, like in the nose and eyes. So things like pollen, mites, or dust can trigger our bodies into producing IgEs.
Can we stop our bodies from producing IgEs?
Well, the reason why we have IgEs in the first place is because it had served a big purpose in keeping our ancestors alive. 200 million years ago was when the first mammals appeared. They were little guys, about 10 centimeters. When we think of predators, we might imagine things like lions or dinosaurs, but there are many microscopic enemies like blood-sucking mites, bacteria, and parasites. So it wasn't just big predators we needed to build defense against, but also predators almost invisible to the naked eye. Even the largest mammals of this planet could be defeated by mites small than the size of a pinky nail, so our immune systems evolved to be able to generate IgEs. There was a study at an agriculture industry university in Japan where they released mites on two groups of mice. One of the groups of mice could generate IgEs and the other group didn't. The group that did not produce IgEs fell victim to the mites, but half of the mice that could produce IgEs were able to repel the mites. Mites have an enzyme that dissolves the skin to get to the bloodstream, so our mammal immune system has evolved to detect this enzyme and then immediately generate IgEs as a response. The inflammatory substances triggered by IgEs get sucked by the mites, and from that, mites can die from sucking the substance, or at least be repelled. So going back to hay fever, 30% of people born before 1955 are allergic to pollen. Out of those born after 1955, 70% to 80% are allergic. So why is there a difference between the generations? A professor at Munich University in Germany was studying allergies in children, and they compared children who grew up on farms and children who didn't. Only a third of the children who had grown up on farms had allergies, and only a quarter had asthma. They vacuumed the homes of these children and studied what entered their vacuums, and in them they found endotoxins, which are often found in animal droppings. So these kids, they'd go play in animal barns and come back to sleep in their rooms. So these endotoxins were even found in their mattresses. There was also a significant difference in allergic responses for those exposed to farms when they were less than 1 year old and those who were older. This is because the cells in babies are still adapting to the environment that they are in. And the reason why there is a significant difference in 1955 was because it was more common for humans to live alongside animals prior to that year. After 1955, more and more people moved to cities and lived in buildings and apartments, so the lack of exposure to animal droppings led to an increase in IgEs misfiring over pollen. Although I've just shared a lot of details about allergies, I am no scientist, so let me share with you my perspective as a monk. We wish to keep our mind as pure and clean as possible, just like how we move to clean spaces to avoid filth and disease. We wish to reduce anger and hatred, to be as peaceful and harmonious of a person as possible, but there is a danger to this. If you do this too much as a child, you won't have an immune system to people who swear. If you don't have any experience with bullies, you won't have a defense mechanism for difficult people in your career. Just as our bodies need antibodies, our minds need emotional antibodies. So we have to expose ourselves to challenges to strengthen ourselves, both body and mind. In regards to hay fever and kafunsho, I want people to understand pollen is not the cause of suffering. The body overreacting is causing us to suffer.
So it's the same with the mind. Thank you, Osho Taigu.